The views expressed are solely those of the speaker and not necessarily those of Paltalk.com, AVM software, or its advertisers.
News Talk is online. News Talk Online is a production of Paltalk.com, the largest multimedia interactive program on the internet with more than 4 million unique users, on demand on iTunes and on YouTube and on my site, GaryBaumgarten.com, where you are encouraged to post your comments, whether you agree with yours truly or not. And thanks to our good friends at CRN Digital Talk Radio, we're syndicated into 12 million households in the United States. I am your host, Gary Baumgarten. Welcome to the show, and also welcome to the show our guest today. Our guest is U.S. Congressman Jerry Nadler, Democrat of New York, whose district encompasses Ground Zero. He has been in the forefront of the fight to get health care for those who responded to the 9/11 attacks and for those who live and work near Ground Zero. He is co-author of House Resolution 6594. It's called the James Zdraga 9/11 Health and Compensation Act. It's named after a New York City police detective who worked on the pile and then died from his illnesses. It would ensure health care for those suffering World Trade Center-related illnesses and compensation for their economic losses. One other area, and there are, I'm sure, a lot of issues that you have questions for the congressman, but I just want to set it up by telling you that one other area has to do with civil liberties. Congressman Nadler is in the forefront of that, protecting our civil liberties in the United States. He chairs the Judiciary Subcommittee on the Constitution, Civil Rights, and Civil Liberties. He's authored a bill as well that would preclude the president from invoking executive privilege in matters that do not threaten national security. Congressman Nadler was back last on this show on September the 11th last year as we and 1010wins.com offered extensive coverage of the memorial service. We welcome you back, Congressman, to News Talk Online on Paltalk.com.
Well, it's good to be back.
It's good to have you. Unfortunately, today there is a little bit of breaking news involving the first issue that I mentioned, and that has to do with 9/11. Kevin Delano, you probably have heard, a firefighter from New York who was assigned to a house in Queens and was one of the first to respond to Ground Zero after the collapse of the Twin Towers, and who spent 40 hours straight rummaging around in the toxic ruins in a futile search for survivors, has just died of leukemia. Another hero to add to the rolls, I guess, Congressman Nadler.
Yes, and I had not heard. I'm sorry to hear that. What is very, very clear is several things. Number one, the federal government is very, very liable because the federal government not only, in the person of Christy Todd Whitman and others, lied and told people, both first responders and residents, that the air was safe to breathe, but also didn't, when they knew it wasn't, but also did not enforce the occupational safety and health laws. And as a direct consequence of that, people have died, thousands and thousands, several tens of thousands are sick at this point that we know about. More will get sick. This is the first leukemia death I've heard of, but the cancers have generally a 10 to 15 year latency period before they show, except for blood cancers, which we're starting to see because they're 4 to 5 year latency periods. Leukemia, of course, is a blood cancer. Most of the sicknesses we've seen so far are respiratory, but it's very clear that probably 70 or 80,000 people are going to get sick as a result of the malfeasance of the federal government, not to mention the actions of the terrorists. And we have to provide for Abraham Lincoln said we have to care for him who shall have borne the battle. It is morally incumbent on the government to provide for the health care for all who get sick as a result of this.
For sure, the people who rushed in while the rest of us were rushing in the opposite direction, the firefighters, the paramedics,
not just,
and the police
yes,
officers.
Certainly the first responders and the heroes, and the people who came from all over the country to help, but also the people who live in that neighborhood, the people who work there, the school children who went to school there. The federal government said, go back to work, go back to school, go back to your apartments, when it shouldn't have. And a lot of those people are getting sick now, and we have to help them too.
And I happened to have been, as you know, with CNN Radio at the time and at that news conference when Christy Todd Whitman misled the public into thinking that the air around Ground Zero was safe to breathe. So what would House Resolution...
Well, it wasn't just the one press conference, it was a number of them. Just the one press conference, it was a number of them. And I remember I set up a group called the Ground Zero Elected Officials Task Force, and we united all the local elected officials, and we hired our own environmental testing, and it showed the high toxicity even indoors in people's apartments. And we gave those results to the EPA and to the press, and we said, stop saying it is safe, stop telling people this. But, of course, they didn't listen.
What would House Resolution 6594 do?
With House Bill 6495, it would do several things. Number one, it would set up on a permanent basis an entitlement to monitor for people who are exposed in the surrounding geographical area to healthcare monitoring, and if they get sick for 9/11 related reasons, to healthcare provision, to paying for their healthcare, in addition to anything that private insurance does, assuming they have private insurance. Secondly, it would set, and we've been doing that to some extent on an ad hoc year-by-year appropriation basis. This would set it up on a permanent basis. Second, it would set up a network of centers of excellence so that we have now a number of institutions, Mount Sinai, Bellevue, etc., in New York, which have developed expertise in diagnosing and dealing with these sicknesses. But if you were a first responder who came here from Los Angeles or Des Moines, Iowa, or wherever, and you go home, there may be no experts there who won't misdiagnose it or whatever. So this would set up essentially a corresponding network to deal with institutions in every state who would get the benefit of the expertise here in New York, so that people who live there, who were first responders, who come down, can go to someone over there who will have the expertise and the benefit of all the research that's been